GaryCon is a convention that celebrates the life and work of the father of all things tabletop role-playing games, and this year I was lucky enough to go, so let me tell you all about GaryCon. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard Quiner, and welcome back to the Daily D20, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. I really just wanted to talk about GaryCon and what the event was like, and how it really kind of opened my eyes about the role-playing game community that is out there. And it was really cool, so I just wanted to share some information with you. Now, GaryCon takes place in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which doesn't really have an airport going into it, so I had to fly into the nearest one, which was Milwaukee, and then get a car and drive to Lake Geneva to participate in this event. So already going from Los Angeles to Wisconsin, which included a layover in Detroit, was a bit of a trip, and then I had to drive about 45 minutes to Lake Geneva to participate, and I had to get there, or I wanted to get there in time to get my badge the night before the convention actually opened. Also, during that evening, they had a pre-convention party where people just showed up, and it was kind of a big welcoming event to see and get to know some members of the community. So I was exhausted by the time I got to the resort where this convention was held, but as soon as I walked in, and this was Wednesday night at around 8 p.m., mind you, the convention started the next day at 8 a.m., but walking in, you could already feel a very different vibe, a very warm, welcoming, a lot of excitement for people to come and play games for a weekend at this convention and just to celebrate the work of Gary Gygax. And I know sometimes we all complain if you go to conventions, lines are always a terrible thing to stand in, it takes a little while. This one it had a line. There was a line at GaryCon, but it took me only about 10 minutes to get through the line, get my badge, get into the next line to buy some of the merch and get ready for the con. Already, that's a pretty good start because it wasn't a long line, it was pretty easy. And then walking in and seeing hundreds of people there ready for the next day to start so they can start playing games. You walk into, they have this kind of event staging area where people were already sitting there playing their own games. They had board games, card games. No one was doing role-playing games in this section at the moment, but it was still very open and welcoming, and it was really cool to see. The next day, when the convention opened, they had several games starting at 8 a.m. I did not sign up for those. I chose my first panel, my first event to sign up for was the D&D Beyond developer panel, which is really cool to see already, but before that, they did have an opening ceremony, which, unfortunately, I got really bad footage. I thought it wasn't happening because it started about 10 minutes late, so I was like, oh, maybe I missed it, maybe it's not happening. And then as I was walking away, heading to go find a bathroom or something, I don't know what I was doing, then I started hearing them talk, and so I rushed back over to try and film, and I was stuck in the back of the crowd, and people were crossing in front of me the whole time. They were polite about it, but I didn't get some great footage, but I did get some footage of it, and it was an interesting experience to be there as Luke Gygax was able to tell some stories about his dad and the attitude he had towards the games while they were growing up, and talked a little bit about his experience as one of the children of Gary Gygax in this interesting environment where creativity is just run rampant, and they've just created this whole game that then, of course, now we see what it turned into, not just a very popular Dungeons and Dragons, but it also spawned all the others that came after it. The tone of this opening ceremony was very respectful, almost a religious kind of sentiment, but more out of respect for the work this guy had done and reverence to what we were all there to do, which was for the next 4 days, we were there to play games and just enjoy the company of the community. Something that did stand out to me is this opening ceremony was happening, but it never got in the way of someone actually playing a game. At one point during the ceremony, a crowd of probably about 10 people just walked right through the middle of it on their way to a gaming table where they were going to play, and no one seemed to bat an eye. It didn't matter. Everyone was there to play games, and so that's just how it was, and it was a neat kind of experience to be able to participate in that opening ceremony and see and to witness what was going on and what these people felt about the game. It was a great way to open the convention, and I will probably try to go back next year and do the same and see that again and maybe get some better footage. I think the thing that really sold me on the convention was the people. It felt like a home. It felt like something that everyone was just so welcoming. The attitude of the entire con was, pull up a seat and play the game, join us in our adventures. There wasn't any sort of judgment going on or anyone being ridiculed or judged because they didn't know the game or because they were young or anything. It was just, yeah, we're all here to play the game, so come on and let's have some fun. Talking to the people was really neat, to meet all the different people who had been playing the game for 40 years or 30 years or however longer than I've been alive, most of them. it's an much older crowd, but it was still, they were very welcoming to someone like myself who had only been playing for about 3 years. There was never any judgment based on the length of time you'd played or your experience level. It was just, yeah, come play with us and learn with us and try these new things with us. And I met quite a few people, and jumping into different games, everyone did have their different play styles, but the GMs who were running games did a good job making them mesh and making it work, because we also all knew this is a one-time thing. It's usually just a one-shot, not something we have to go back and play with the same people over and over again. Not that that would be a bad thing, but it was just nice to know that you could just be a little silly or be different than your usual play style for a game. Games were running all day long. From 8 a.m. to midnight, games were happening. So some people, and I've talked to several who had played games for 16 hours a day. That's a lot of role-playing game, which I did not do. I could have done that probably, but the games were interesting. They didn't just have Dungeons and Dragons. They had every other tabletop role-playing game out there was at this convention. They did have some Pathfinder going on. They had one that I just learned about called Dungeon Crawl Classic. They had one called Fate of the Norns, which is another role-playing game. They had so many, and everything was welcome for players to just show up and play if there weren't enough players. Usually we had to sign up ahead of time, like I had to go online and sign up for different events or different games ahead of time in order to play there. So that was just a really neat experience to have 4 days of wall-to-wall gaming happening. You couldn't turn around without seeing someone playing a game somewhere. Even on their downtime, people would bust out cards and have card games going on, or they'd be playing Magic the Gathering or anything. It was just a lot of games happening, and it was a great celebration of gaming and this enjoying the game and the company of other people. And of course, as any convention, there was a lot of art and vendors on site. They had a vendor hall that was open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., which I thought was a little short, but I get it. The vendors need to sell their stuff, and they also need to enjoy the convention on their own time as well. But what was neat for me was to see the creativity that these vendors put into creating their product that was almost all designed to help game masters run their games. They of course had booksellers, they had art, they had people doing laser cutting, these kind of wood crafts. They had all that, which was cool, but then they had other stuff that was really designed to elevate the games and take them to the next level. So I really enjoyed walking through the vendor hall. I spent too much time in there. I should not have been in there as much as I was, but it was just still really neat to see. The feel that it wasn't so crowded that it was impossible to get around, but it was enough that you could feel the excitement of the products there at the hall. And talking to a lot of the vendors, they did say it was a very successful year for them. The community showed them a lot of love and appreciation and paid a lot of money for their stuff. So that's always good to hear. One way I like to describe the con is kind of like an adventurer's tavern. You couldn't walk around the resort without hearing or overhearing stories of adventures that players had gone on during the weekend. There were stories of throwing dwarves in different ways and using the party mechanics to defeat the big bad guy, and everyone had these grand epic stories that had happened, and they were all telling them. So it was almost like walking through an adventurer's tavern and just overhearing all the stuff that these people had done. I really did enjoy that. It was kind of a neat experience to know that I had my experiences and everyone else had their own experiences, but we could all talk about it in the same manner and enjoy and be happy for the other players' experiences, even if we didn't participate. It was just a really cool place to be in that case. I do plan on going next year, which is what I'm going to say. Next year, I have a lot of things that I did this year that I think I did wrong. Mainly, I didn't sign up for enough games. I signed up for more panels than games. Panels are good, but I would have signed up for more games and just enjoyed playing it. That's probably what I'll plan on doing next year. I do want to go back and run games, which is the other thing I'm planning, which means I have to start preparing some one-shots, or a one-shot or 2 one-shots probably, to run with different groups while I'm there. Because if I can run 16 hours of games over the weekend, then that goes to credit for next year's badge. So I didn't do that this year, but next year I plan on doing that as well. And we'll see how that goes next year. I mean, after this year, I'm pretty well hooked. It was a great convention. But yeah, I highly recommend, if you get a chance, or if you find yourself with an opportunity to go see GaryCon and meet the community, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of effort if you're not from the area, but for me, it was worth it, and I really look forward to it. So that's my 2.5 cents on GaryCon. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos just like this one every day. And of course, fellow Game Masters, I've been Richard Quiner. Thank you for watching.